Hello, I'm Hugh Coakley from the Guildford Dragon News. The Dragon are conducting a series of interviews with the leaders or nominated representatives of the various parties at Guildford Borough Council in the lead up to the local elections on May the 4th. So today we've got the great pleasure of having Ramsey Nagaty, Guildford Borough Councillor for Shalford, and the leader of the Guildford Greenbelt Group with us today. Now, Ramsey has kindly agreed to be interviewed on behalf of the Guildford Greenbelt Group. Welcome, Ramsey, and thank you very, very much for talking to the Guildford Dragon News.
My pleasure, Hugh.
Thank you. So I'll launch straight into it. Ramsey, what's your policy on the local plan? When will it be reviewed and what changes will you be seeking?
The plan has to be reviewed within 5 years. As a result of my motion, which was passed at full council, that review will now take place and should be covering a wider aspect than what it looked like was going to happen. I think it's very important that GGG and others who support our views are elected, because we want a robust review. We don't want it's going
Ramsey,
quite well.
Ramsey, it's got to be reviewed in 5 years' time anyway. So that's 2024. Yeah. So how are you how is GGG different from the other parties?
Well, we feel it's not fit for purpose. We feel infrastructure and brownfield first is referenced in the local plan, but it clearly was not prepared in that way. The Greenbelt sites were chosen first. We believe that the whole plan should be looked at, especially in view of climate change and the car dependency of the large sites. We believe that the sites should be sustainable and should not be totally dependent on cars. And we therefore feel that the size of some of these sites should be looked at, bearing in mind the lack of infrastructure, whether that's roads, electricity, water, sewage capacity, whether it's to do with medical facilities and schools. Whatever the constraints are, they have to be seriously considered.
Have you been happy with the progress of the local plan so far?
No,
because there has been work on reviewing the plan has started, I understand.
Yes, but I felt that initially that was mainly looking at the infrastructure aspects that would enable the town centre master plan to take place, and would not necessarily look at restoring Greenbelt status to either the villages or any particular site that did not look as if it was forthcoming. We as GGG ensured that the ONS, the Office for National Statistics, actually confirmed in writing to Guildford Borough Council that the housing need and population estimates for Guildford were completely wrong and were overstated. As such, we're looking for a reduced housing figure, and based on that reduced housing figure, we believe we have exceptional circumstances to not start, whether you start with it or you adjust it, but the standard method should not be totally applicable to the local plan. We should end up with a lower housing need figure, and with a lower housing need figure, we can start to see where best to put those houses and where best to get the type of houses that Guildford needs. We are increasingly building flats or houses which are more suitable for people travelling up to London and using Guildford as an overnight stopover. What we want is proper homes, preferably for local people as much as possible, but also for others as well, but who are going to live and work and maintain Guildford.
Are your policies the same as R4GV on this, in so much as you have an electoral pact with R4GV? Am I right in saying that?
I wouldn't call it exactly an electoral pact, but we have an understanding on certain aspects and in certain wards. We feel passionately that the villages have been the centre for a lot of this development. The early developments from the local plan have been sort of made up with a major onslaught of any sort of green space in the villages that were inset from the Greenbelt. And that's allowed a free-for-all with so much new housing. without proper supporting infrastructure. And that infrastructure can be roads, schools, sewage, electricity, whatever. It's just not there. And then most of those houses are going to be car dependent. And with climate change, we have to think about not only the flooding aspects and all the other problems that might bring, but also we have to think about reducing car travel, whether it's petrol, diesel, lithium batteries, or what it is. They all generate
Ramsey,
particle emissions and other emissions which are dangerous to health.
I hear what you say. I'm going to move on because we've got such a huge range of issues to cover. There's been a lot of work done on shaping Guildford's future and the associated master plan.
Yeah.
Would GGG want to continue with that work? Should you gain councillors in the chamber?
Urban regeneration, we feel, and protection of the countryside are two sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other. And obviously, the more we have town centre regeneration with more homes, the more we regenerate the high street. And I think that's very important. You know, we've seen a drop off in retail. We see many empty shops. We want to have a revitalized high street. Do
you see that the master plan is the vehicle for that regeneration?
I would rather see some form of master planning rather than ad hoc buildings going up left, right, and centre, competing with each other and not having some sort of Guildford flavour to them. So I believe there is a place for town centre master planning, and I would hope that going forward we can do it increasingly better than it's attempted to be done in the past.
So are you satisfied with the progress on the master plan to date?
Well, no, because obviously the town centre has slowed down, partly due to North Street development, and then the town centre master plan for Bedford Square and along the river, and still has some way to go. We're getting there. Whether it's the right plan, I think it needs a little bit more fine-tuning. We need to be very careful about aspects such as height and density. Unfortunately, I'll probably get onto it later on, but unfortunately the planners and the council that was in charge before, the Lib Dems and the Conservatives before that, felt that the sites and views SPD would be sufficient to protect Guildford and to maintain the views, limit the height, and put in a certain amount of character. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And I argued strongly for a height limit. And the reason I argued for that was also feeling cramped in with high-rise buildings.
One second,
also because,
one second, Ramsey. One second, Ramsey. Well, 1 second, Ramsey. You cut out there. You argued. You are. Hang on. You argued.
I argued.
I've got to keep it brief now, please.
Yeah,
you argued.
I argued at the EABs. I argued at the exec, and I argued at full council for a height limit. I was probably the only one, and one of the reasons was, as we found with Debenhams, we as GBC were outbid for Debenhams, and the developers who bought it then put in a high-rise building. And then when we tried to squeeze down the height, and I gave it an idea of layering it back to lessen the impact on the high street view. And when we did that, they then argued that, of course, viability reasons, they wouldn't provide very many affordable homes. So if they'd known what the height limit was, that would have had an impact on the price payable for the land, and that would then have enabled a better solution in the long run.
All right.
Two-edged sword.
All right. Well, there has been a video called "The Battle for Guildford" on social media.
Yeah,
Have you seen that video?
I have. Yeah, I was.
What's your party's view of that video?
I think we felt that it was clearly aimed to put a hole in the sails of R4GV. Robin Horsley also aimed at least one dart at GGG. I'm not sure what the motivation behind his campaign is. It's somewhat incomprehensible to us that someone with such media savvy as Robin Horsley, who I understand is Chris Blow's son, would not.
Chris Blow being an R4GV councillor.
Yeah, that Robin Horsley would not be interested in Guildford's future and know about the North Street potential development. I mean, everyone's known that it's in a desolate state and needs work doing on it. And the consultation was mainly the responsibility of the developer. And I attended meetings with the developer in a building next to the bus station. They produced a large scale model, which I think there was on display there and in the high street, especially when there were special markets in the high street at special days. It was there. There were quite a few areas where that could be seen, and I felt that there was detailed consultation. And we find it interesting that such a person as Robin raises the issue that there wasn't proper consultation. We find with a lot of these things, and we go back to the local plan in 2019, there was public consultation for that. But what we found was it was a joke. We had a shop set up selling balloons, handing out balloons to children. You asked for a copy of the plan, they didn't have it. I mean, there were posters on the sides of buses with balloons. I'm not sure what balloons have to do with the local plan.
With regard to
that was the case. And when we made sensible suggestions, they were brushed aside with basically the same sentence on every suggestion, and yet they claimed they had fully consulted. On North Street, there was lots of suggestions about different types of design and everything else, and a lot of the responses on that were quite detailed. So
okay, can I
more important to have a proper detailed response to the consultation. In my view, if that had been bad, I could understand Robin raising it. Right, but I can't understand
you've made your point.
You haven't consulted.
You've made your point. So he said that. He also talked about the height policy. That it sounds like it sounds like you agree with him on that.
Well, I agreed that I would prefer less height, and I also did argue in various meetings that I attended for a better solution for the bus depot. I feel putting the bus depot where it still is a waste of prime land. I felt it could either go underground or it could go closer to Bedford Square, closer to where the cinema is.
Without going into the detail Ramsey, we can't go into the detail on North Street.
Yeah.
But clearly you do agree with him to some degree on the height policy.
Yeah, because I had argued about the height policy. However, when we looked at the plan at planning committee, I had to decide on the planning policies that are in the local plan, the development management policies we have, and whether or not it conformed to those. And I had to give weight to the advantage of having regeneration and the public spaces and the car-free areas and so on and so forth. And I gave great weight to that, and a lot of weight to the fact that building homes in the town centre, to my view, was better than building them where they're more car dependent.
Okay,
and
point taken.
I found in favour.
So next area, again briefly, we know that Guildford Borough Council's finances are tight. What do you think GBC can do to increase revenue?
That's a good question, because obviously, as you know, the government makes sure that the councils can only increase their council tax by a certain level. And therefore, they put great pressure on the councils to maintain services with ever diminishing revenue from council tax. Charging higher fees for services, use of leisure facilities, etc., even if we did that, would not raise significant amounts of income. What we have tried to do is move towards cooperation with Waverley in such a way that we get more efficient service and better value for council taxpayers. What we have to be careful of there is not to dilute the democratic accountability and to make sure people need to know who's responsible for what. I think that's important, but it still allows us to make some savings working together with Waverley and maybe in the future other local boroughs next to us to try and minimise overheads and have a more efficient service.
Okay, so on to another topic, Ramsey. Some say that Guildford Borough Council is not doing enough to prioritise measures to address climate change. What's your thought? What's your thoughts?
Well, we did pass a climate change emergency, and based on that, I did ask the barrister for the council if that was sufficient reason to review the local plan immediately, and he said that was a very good question, and it's probably correct. Unfortunately, at the time, the Lib Dems were in charge, and the Lib Dem leader was only interested in finding out whether or not she was in the wrong to have voted for the local plan, and did not review it. I wish we had. Climate change should be at the core of all policy decisions, and that's our view, that's our policy. We would ensure that climate change policies were at the core of every single decision that the council made. One of the biggest generators we've got, of course, of carbon emissions is the spectrum. And we've suggested in meetings that we look at modern technology to utilize the heat generated in freezing the ice for the ice ring to warm the swimming pool. That's a technology that's being adapted in Holland and Sweden. Further insulation of the glass roof, which leaks a lot of heat out of the glass roof, would be another interim measure. Going forward, we would need a wide consultation and review of what future leisure centre should contain, what the facilities are that people want in the 22nd century or whatever. But that would need a lot of consultation, not just at borough level, but also with the county and with adjoining counties and even London, because lots of people use that facility. And at the moment, it's a GBC facility, and the cost of building a new one, more efficient, would be much more than I think we can afford on our own. And so we would need to gather wider sourcing of funds for that.
Okay, it doesn't sound very hopeful that there's going to be much progress there, or am I misreading?
Well, initially we've agreed that we're going to spend some money at the council to maintain it going forward, whilst all these sort of matters can go ahead for how to come forward with a better leisure centre in the future.
Okay. Last theme. Over the last 4 years, there's been increasing complaints about customer services at GBC. I mean, people have bitterly complained, consistently complained about the telephones, people not answering the telephones, and as you're aware, I'm sure, the Guildford's planning department has come bottom nationally of the table for non-major planning applications. I mean, how will your party improve customer services at GBC?
I think one of the reasons why there's been a downfall was partly the COVID pandemic, which had a lot of people off work, a lot of people working from home.
But that's national. Every council had that. But GBC is at the bottom of the planning table nationally.
I'll get on to planning shortly, but the problem with even with the planning office, where people have turned up and maybe no one's there because they're working from home, any organisation needs good management, and I think we've brought in Tom Horwood. I think he's a good professional council manager.
So
and I think,
Tom Horwood is the joint Waverley and Guildford Borough Council chief executive.
And I think we have to give him time to come forward with new management style. But I think he will get there. He seems very capable.
He's been in post for a year now.
Yeah. What I find is that we moved to a web-based interface where we felt it was more efficient and everything else for people to be able to log in and do things online, put in their complaints online, put in their requests for services online, and so on and so forth. But a lot of people aren't up to speed with IT, and a lot of people will have great difficulty navigating their way through. And therefore, you still need a certain level of personal interface. And I think that's been lacking to some extent in our transition towards an integrated IT system.
So what do you suggest is going to happen then?
Well, I think we have to make sure that there are still face-to-face facilities available, that there are still people answering the telephone more frequently than they do, and that there are proper rotas in place to make sure that while some staff may well be working from home, there are still some staff in each department. And I think that's critical. And I believe that by continuing to cooperate with Waverley, we may be able to get further on with our reorganisation and be able to provide a better service for less money. But obviously, the more we have less money, that it's very difficult to maintain the services as they were. But obviously, I would love them to be Rolls-Royce standard, and I believe they should be Rolls-Royce standard. I do have concerns about the planning department, and I've raised those. There is an argument that we should give priority to some of the easier ones to do, get them out of the way. And just recently, the planning department did have a blitz on these types of applications, and I think that has helped to bring.
I believe that's what other councils did some time back.
Yeah. The problem we've had is the turnover in staff. I think that's been enormous. And
but why Guildford? Why Guildford? Why not Milton Keynes or
the high cost of living
Winchester?
here? But I know that a lot of applications are fairly good money being offered, but we're just not getting the applications from suitable candidates. Okay. And then we're having to use interim people, temporary people, contract staff, and that doesn't help get to have a good flow of work. Okay. Fortunately.
Okay, Ramsey, that's the end of our interview with you as the leader of the GGG group. Thank you ever so much for talking to the Guildford Dragon News.
We're always interested in supporting our local newspaper.
Thank you. That's very heartening. Thank you.
My pleasure.